thought about calling this video something like Big Dummy Makes Another Big Dumb Mistake, but I'm not sure if YouTube would be happy with that. I'm sure we'll have another chance to use that in the future though. In one of our last videos, a few of you keen-eye viewers noted a potentially very big issue with this car and its new turbo setup. Mistakes were made along the way, but today I'm going to share a bit on how we got this issue sorted so that we can actually enjoy this car again. Hopefully. Stay tuned. Welcome back into Browney's garage. Straight up top, let's get it out the way that I am clearly not a mechanic, and I'm probably even less of a tuning expert than that, but it's probably safe to say that anything in the 13:1 for air-fuel ratio while under boost and full load, like we saw in that clip at the track, is an invitation for a big boom and a very bad time, just when I thought it was time to enjoy this thing. Know that this video and the troubleshooting actually took place over many weeks on and off. This hobby can be incredibly hard work to the point that I often question my sanity. Instead, hopefully this video can make some of you feel better about chasing your own little issues and that you're not alone. I'd be confident that it happens to everyone. So, when did this start? The car had recently been tuned with no sign of fuel problems on the dyno, so what the hell was going on? What had changed since then? This was a fresh turbo conversion, so it wasn't until after that tune that we were able to drive the car hard finally. That's when a overboosting issue on the street appeared, and we changed the rear housing on the turbo to address this. The housing we went to was a pulsar turbo housing with a larger flapper valve that we also ported out a little bit ourselves. This extra flow for the wastegate did fix our overboosting and spiking issues. So it's probably fair to assume that our exhaust flow has been increased. Looking back through some of the videos directly after changing that housing, it was pretty mixed with not the worst AFRs we'd see. Though looking closely now, they all look to be more lean than I would think ideal. But any runs I'd used for the video were close-ish, and I'd been far too much more preoccupied with the boost gauge and watching that to see if the issue was sorted. So we called it good and sent it out to the track. Then, of course, it was inconsistent again at the track, only worse than I'd seen before for some reason. Our first 3 runs were pretty bad, running solidly in the 13:1 or worse territory, before the final 3 runs looked more like it should in the 11s or thereabouts, I believe. The issue was then really brought to light by some viewers. I looked back on the footage and started street testing to find that, yes, this was definitely now an issue. The severity varied seemingly at random, and you wouldn't notice any issue just driving the car if you didn't look at the gauge, but it couldn't be ignored. That rear turbo housing setup is all that had changed other than some time passing, but I wanted to be sure, and I didn't think it should have that much of an effect in itself. I played with and checked too much to mention, and this is not a how-to by any means. I could be way off the mark with some of this, but I'll show some of the process I went through. The car was scanned with my scan tool and showed no codes, but looking at the long and short term fuel trims, they were doing much more work than I thought they should, pointing me to a potential fueling issue. It seemed on balance the car was trying to add fuel, And these trims affect areas that aren't full throttle, like I was seeing on the gauge during our runs. So I was now heading down the path of a constant fuel pressure issue as a possible cause in my head, especially because it didn't seem to have a miss that a blocked injector may give. And unfortunately, these cars don't come with a fuel pressure sensor, which would have been really helpful. So I decided to check the vacuum line for the fuel pressure regulator, and it seemed fine. While I was there, I did a general check for any vacuum leaks around the manifold at idle by spraying carb cleaner and listening to the idle, as well as watching the fuel trims on the scan tool. And nothing major appeared there either. So with the fuel filter being a cheap and easy service item, I figured let's at least check that first before I look like a goose. With a new one swapped in, we've shown how to do this in past videos. The car was started with it already warm from running previously, and for a moment I noticed no change, till I saw this on the AFR gauge. And fuel trims were back close to zero. That fuel filter was 3 years old, so probably due to be changed, I know, but it had seen only a few thousand kilometers. I had to know more, and after a few days of letting it dry off and with no specialist tools, I cavemanned it open while trying to avoid catching fire or contaminating it with metal bits. And it looked fine, I think. No real signs of being overly dirty, and only a small amount of contaminants had been drained out of it at removal. Perhaps the filtering material had gone bad or something, but nothing visibly wrong. All I know was it looked like we had made an improvement. In hindsight, I think that's correct, but also probably not as much as it seemed. See, I now think I may have reset those fuel tables when I sprayed some carb cleaner directly on the pod filter during vacuum testing. Not sure if that's a thing, but it was dumb anyway. I was demonstrating to Mrs. Browney on the scan tool how it may show up with an extreme example of a vacuum leak. And after a drive, we still had leaner AFRs than I thought they should be, so we continued down the rabbit hole. Next, I removed and checked the fuel pressure regulator for any blockages in both the fuel and vacuum side, but nothing obvious here either. Up until now, I've really tried avoiding just firing parts at the car with a parts cannon, which isn't easy because my mind often goes there first and costs me much more money than needed. But screw it, I was overthinking now and wanted to try sort it myself still. I had a set of what I thought were known to be good injectors, so in those went. Not a hard job, but it's a bit short on space in there. I removed the intake piping, throttle body, injector wiring and clips, and unbolted the fuel rail as I went, to then pull the rail away and work each injector out. All looked okay, but the extra set was placed back in there anyway, using some oil on the O-rings so they didn't tear or get caught, and it was slapped back together. The fuel pump assembly was also a possible cause, so I pumped out all the fuel I could and removed it to check for any issues with the hoses in there. All again looked okay, but hell, while we're here, let's throw a bigger pod assembly in to help with any possible fuel starve at lower fuel levels. This unit takes that pod's capacity from 500 ml up to 1 litre. An upgrade we might as well do now because I don't want to have to open this again for a very long time. The new pod is also a good bit taller, and these assemblies compress quite a lot when installed. Does anyone see an issue coming for someone losing patience and willing to apply enough force to make it work? More on this later, but it was reinstalled with only a small amount of self-doubt added at this stage. Not enough to stop more testing. This is probably going to be pretty slippery compared to what we normally do, but I'll give it a go. It's a little bit drier up here. That looked okay. Not enough to be confident yet though, so I headed out on a cold but dry night again to see. looking better than the worst we've experienced, but still a long way from good. Time to call in the pros. I felt I'd done what I could and looked at the issue for long enough. Maybe it was only some extra efficiency or change that had come about as part of the whole rear turbo housing swap, and it was more pronounced in certain situations or something. So it was booked back in with the guys at Max Performance, who then put in the work for me to have it turned around and sorted on the day, which I'm very grateful for with the 2 or so hours I have to travel each way to be there. But no, the parts cannon wasn't done, and part of that is my poor communication to blame. Parts, just me. Parts, it's just cars. My best recount of the day is this, because I don't need to be filming them as they work, and I'll probably never be a good vlogger. The guys ran it up on the dyno and saw straight away that it was running out of fuel. Again, there's no onboard fuel pressure sensor, so after we discussed it, it was decided that it could very well be that one or all of the injectors could be performing at less than their full potential. We had injector upgrades coming in the future anyway, so let's eliminate them now and throw some brand new 1000cc injectors in. With a mix of nerves and depression at the earlier than expected hit my wallet was about to take, I did what I do so well. I took a walk to eat my feelings away at a nearby shop. During that, I got the call that we were still out of fuel, and immediately felt like I would bring all those feelings and my nearly finished kebab back up. I'd done something right at least. Without prompting, they said they wanted permission to pull out the fuel pump and look there next. Just as I had done, except more professionally and much less ham-fisted. Because, yep, for anyone that saw it coming, I had partially crushed the fuel supply hose in the fuel pump assembly when compressing it on reinstall. Not sure if those damn corrugated hoses were a touch too long, or if it was purely a user error from me, guilty, but at least the guys at Max worked through and sorted it for me. I will say, I am fairly confident that I didn't have this issue the first time with the factory pod setup, and the first turbo dyno session proves it was all fine. But if I did it once, maybe I did it the first time too. That taller pod did make it harder, but it clearly can be done fine with just a touch more care or experience. So I came home from the tuners with my tail between my legs and a slightly lighter wallet, thanks to my dumb mistake. But I had a completely happy car again. Thanks again to Zane and the guys at Max Performance for sorting it out on the day, dealing with this hack, and for not making me feel like a complete dummy, but still explaining everything as they went to me. To try sum it all up, I think we did throw the tune out a little because I changed the rear housing on the turbo to sort that overboosting issue. Not a mistake, it had to be done, but lesson learned to keep a very close eye on these things when making changes like this. I'd be surprised if it made a huge difference though, so perhaps there was an issue somewhere else already I hadn't noted. Maybe even that fuel filter, because I still think the new one did make some difference. Even by the butt dyno, it felt a touch better after changing just that, with boost coming in slightly quicker, so there's a lesson there too. Go out and change your fuel filter if you haven't already. But finally, I did introduce another issue while trying to sort this one with that fuel feed line. An important reminder to try not to just parts cannon an issue, because you can introduce new issues on top of it. But at some stage it's unavoidable, and we've all been there too. It happens. In the end, we're only out a bit of extra labour, some of my own time, and I've brought forward the cost of those injectors and new fuel pod. Oh, and I lost a heap of extra sleep while I was trying to work out what was going on. It could have been much worse though. really not sure if that engine would have lasted if we were pushing more power and had that issue come up. But now with those injectors, we are one step closer to going for more power. It will happen. Hopefully, if you're facing an issue at home that you're struggling to sort, this can be a reminder to do what you can to chip away and try and sort it. And don't beat yourself up too much. There's a lot of us out here that are doing the same thing. Now, I can properly drive this thing as is for a bit, if the rain ever buggers off. And I even managed a clip of Mrs. Browney driving it and us being giggling children with the turbo noises.
Good job.
Dumb, I know, but being able to start sharing it with her and other family and friends now has made it feel really that much more worthwhile. Thanks again everyone for the support. Don't forget to like and share these videos if you can to help us keep going. It really does make a big difference. And stay tuned for more on this car and the EB and ED Fairmont project, which we will be getting back to soon. Oh, and try not to eat your feelings. Easier said than done, I know, but try not to. Cheers, guys.